Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 13 through 15. Anybody want to read? Yeah, chapter 5. Yeah, remember we're going through the law. That's right. I have a lot of other verses, so there's a lot of reading to be done. All right. We'll go ahead and read that first.
Your tasks in 6 days, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. On that day you must not do any work, you, your son, your daughter, your male slave, your female slave, your ox, your donkey, any other animal, or the foreigner who lives with you, so that your male and female slaves like yourself may have rest. Recall that you were slaves in the land of Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there by strength and power. That is why the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day.
Okay. I want you to note something as though we just had Deuteronomy to look at for a moment. And then we'll talk about like the larger theology of Sabbath and scripture. But I want you to notice here, why is he having them observe the Sabbath? Huh? Well, it is a shadow, but that's the larger theology. I mean, like just if you had Deuteronomy alone. Did he say that? May have rest. I'm trying to where you are. Okay. Well, okay, so you're observing Sabbath so that your male and your female slave may have rest. That's true. But why are they there to remember it? Why are they actually there you go. Sabbath is given to Israel specifically to reenact their slavery and salvation from it. It's really important that the law is not rest on the seventh day. That's not what the law is. The law is you are to work for 6 days and do all you're to labor and you're to do all your work on 6 days. In other words, the command is to work for 6 days. And then on the seventh day to rest. Because they're reenacting their slavery in Egypt and their salvation from it is what the Sabbath is. Now, this itself, in the larger theology, reenacts creation because we are in, frankly, a slavery in the process of creation. As God is making the new heavens and new earth, we have to go through this heavens and this earth first. And so this is a type of slavery. And this ultimate Sabbath day is the day when he is finished with the process of creation. And so Israel in the Old Testament was to proclaim the Sabbath, proclaim this theology that God is the Savior, not only of Israel, but basically of the whole world and creation, because there will come a day when he is done with creation. He has overcome all chaos, all evil. He has rid it from the world, and then the new world will begin. That's the theology of Sabbath. Should Christians observe the Sabbath? Yeah, I mean literally for right now. Why not? Yeah, were you slave from? Yeah. Go ahead. Right, but you're not. So are they observing it um to proclaim to the world that they were saved from sin and death, or that they were saved from slavery out of Egypt? So I agree with you. That is the fulfillment of it. But that's not what that's not what the command is. The command is not convey to the world, to Israel. The command is not convey to the world that you've been saved from sin and death. That is our command as Christians. We do that, but we don't do it through Sabbath because that's not our command. It's not given to us to proclaim that, because the command is specifically to people who are of Abraham's descent, who were enslaved in Egypt and now have been freed. And that itself is to parallel that God is in a process of creation, and that we're still in a land of chaos, still in a land of oppression. We're under the devil's world, the devil's chains, but God is going to actually have a day when that's completed and removed. When Jesus comes, Jesus doesn't just say it is finished in terms of completing creation. By resurrecting, he brings in the new heavens and new earth now. So we don't celebrate the Sabbath as a proclamation that the new heavens and new earth have come in, because Sabbath is about the last day when God finally rids everything and he rests, and obviously it then extends on into eternity. So we celebrate what the church fathers called the eighth day. That is, it's the continuation as the new world begins, and the Sabbath the rest continues on into eternity, because there's no other days after that. We're celebrating what happens after God rids the world of chaos, which is why then we celebrate Sunday as a way of saying that, but it's not Sunday as just a day, as though it just Sunday, it ends. Sunday is the entire week, because again, the new day, the eighth day, does not end. There is no end to it. It's a continual rest. So we are in Sabbath. And that's what the eighth day is supposed to basically describe. We're in the Sabbath, which is why the early church had morning and evening prayers on Monday, and morning and evening prayers on Tuesday, and morning and evening prayers on Wednesday. And then they met, and you see in the book of Acts to where, yeah, they meet on Sunday, but then it also says they're meeting every day, daily. And the understanding is that we are in the new heavens, new earth, in a way, in the already not yet sense. We're in the new heavens, new earth. We're in the Sabbath because Christ has called that all in an already sense. So we don't proclaim Israel's message anymore, because Israel's message was a shadow of what was to come. Now, I'm going to prove this to you, because this is what the New Testament is going to say. And as I've argued before, I'm just going to try to solidify to you, Jesus breaks the literal Sabbath, because his whole point is that he's bringing in something new. He's the Son of Man. That's an old wineskin. He's bringing in a new wineskin to put new wine in it. And that was for the old wine, which is Israel under slavery and proclaiming their deliverance from it and all that. In other words, that was a shadow. Christ is bringing in the substance, which is himself. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. No, I would say, so I think Sabbath, which is only ever practiced by Israel and then those who are influenced by the Bible after, right? Like Egypt had like a 10-day week. Assyrians just observed like monthly moon, changes or whatever, like the 14th day and all that sort of thing. So I strictly see Sabbath, the actual like setting up of a Sabbath day, as a recreation of the theology of evil that God's overcoming and creation and the process of that, and as a shadow of that, Israel being delivered from Egypt. Now, the principle that man should like rest is probably a good principle, but I don't see it as a moral. I think ceremonial law ultimately is theology, not morality. I think that's what people make a mistake, because they read ritual law as morality, and they're like, well, why would God change his morality? And it's like, it's not morality. The New Testament's very clear in saying it's theology, and that it's a shadow of what Christ will do, and the substance is Christ. And therefore, then you have Paul say, as we'll read in Colossians, for instance, no one's therefore to judge you concerning a Sabbath day, a literal Sabbath day. Because why? Well, because Christ ultimately is the substance of what the Sabbath is trying to get at. And we are to remain in Christ daily, because we have now entered into the new creation that his resurrection brought in. And his resurrection ultimately is a part of it, which is why he's the first fruits in resurrection. And he's not resurrected like when we're resurrected. We're resurrected later when this actually all happens and the new world's brought in, he's resurrected beforehand to show, yeah, I've already sealed the deal. This new world's happening, and my resurrection is a part of that. In fact, Christ has been resurrected not to go to heaven. He could have gone to heaven as a spirit. He could have just remained in heaven as a spirit. Christ is resurrected as a reward from God to say, the world to come is your world. You have it now, and everyone in you will inherit that world with you, everyone united to you, and they'll inherit what you inherit, which is your resurrection as well. And so it's Sabbath theology is really trying to point us to the world to come, to set our minds on the world to come, not on some sacred day during the week. That's not the point of it. The sacred day is to foreshadow the day that never ends. Yes. Yep. Yeah, I think his body is the only physical thing of the world to come that currently is in the state that it will continue in for eternity. Nothing else physical is in that state. So his body alone is a part of that new world to come. Now, spiritually, we all have a part of the new world to come. So the spirit given to us and that state and all of it, like that's all a part of the world to come eternally. But he alone, his body, is the only physical thing that really is God's seal and promise that everything else will follow that physical nature of his body. Everything else that's in him will eternally be that. And that's the theology of Sabbath. And therefore, that's why Jesus breaks the Sabbath. We're going to read the text. I want you to look and read the text and tell me if you think it's just people accusing him of breaking it, or if he himself implicitly is admitting, yeah, I'm breaking it, and righteously so. So let's actually read some of those texts. First one, I want you to go to John 5:18. This is the claim of the Pharisees that he's doing this, but John is actually stating this. So a lot of people would be like, oh, well, this is just what the Pharisees claim. But I want you to notice John is actually stating it as a fact. And he states two things as a fact. Who wants to read it? Yeah.
The Jews tried all the harder to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own father, making himself equal with God.
Okay. He was calling God his own father, making himself equal to God. Is that a claim the Pharisees are making that is true? Or is John just saying, oh, the Pharisees are saying that, but it's not true? Jesus didn't actually claim that. Anybody know the theology of John? Yeah, John is saying it. And whether the Pharisees are saying it too, that's fine. But John is affirming, yeah, that is what he was doing. It makes no sense to say, well, the first one's a lie, though. That's not what he was doing. John would have said something like, oh, no, he wasn't breaking the Sabbath. They were just accusing him of that. John doesn't say they were accusing him. John says he was doing it. He was breaking the Sabbath. Not that they were accusing him of breaking the Sabbath. And even if it was an accusation, he's affirming that the one accusation is true. Throughout this entire book, he actually affirms it. Now, you won't get from that alone. You can still be like, but I think, they're just claiming it or whatever. It's very clear, though, when you read in Mark and Matthew, that he actually says he is breaking it. So Matthew 12. Who wants to read? It's verses 1 through 14. Yeah.
All right. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry and began to pick some heads of grain and eat them. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath." He answered, "Haven't you read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God, and he and his companions ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for them to do, but only for the priests. Or haven't you read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple desecrate the day and yet are innocent? I tell you, one greater than the temple is here. If you had known what these words mean, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. Going on from that place, he went into their synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, they asked him, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" He said to them, "If any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a man than a sheep? Therefore, it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath." Then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." So he stretched it out, and it was completely restored, just as sound as the other. But the Pharisees went out and plotted how they might kill Jesus.
Bit of an irony there, by the way. Like, they're arguing that he's like breaking the law by breaking the Sabbath. And here they're plotting on the Sabbath, which is supposed to be the day of the Lord there, how to murder someone. And he's sitting here restoring a man and his life. What's his response? So they come up and they're like, why are your disciples basically breaking the Sabbath? Why are they? It's not permitted. And this is the word. Whenever the Pharisees use this word, they mean it's not permitted in the law. And Jesus doesn't argue with them whether it's their tradition or the law, because you'll have a lot of Sabbatarians try to argue that. It's like he's not arguing that point with them. Notice he'll actually give his own example from the law. The priests, he says, break the Sabbath every Sabbath, and yet they're guiltless. Now, this is very important. This is where you get, and this is where I talk about, like, this is a theology, not a morality. You could not do this with any moral. There is no argument where you can be like, well, sometimes it's okay for God to, lie or perjure himself. Well, the scripture says he can't lie. God can't murder. So Jesus wouldn't be able to be like, well, sometimes it's okay to murder. Sometimes it's okay to commit adultery. Sometimes it's okay to not actually have God as your only God. And sometimes it's okay to craft idols and worship them. It's like, no, none of that, because those are morals that you cannot set aside. But when it comes to ritual law, like the Sabbath, the priest can go ahead and break it. Why? Because it's not a moral. It's not inherently moral. Now, you might say it's moral for you to do what God tells you to do. If I give this example, right? If I tell my kids to take out the garbage, they need to take out the garbage. There's nothing inherently moral or immoral about taking out the garbage, though. That's the point. However, there is something inherently moral about committing adultery, inherently moral about murder, inherently moral about perjuring. So this is the issue. By Jesus' own admission here, the Sabbath is not a moral law. I don't care if you don't like the division of moral and ceremonial. It doesn't matter. Jesus is making the distinction because it can be set aside, and you cannot do that with the moral law. It is a sin. If this is a moral and Jesus sets it aside and the priests are setting it aside, then they are in sin. They cannot be guiltless. That's impossible. And if that's the case, you shouldn't follow Jesus then. He's a sinner. This is really important. I realize we have traditions that are like, no, the Sabbath, that's a moral law, and we need to obey it. And it's, in the Westminster Confession, and, people have always kind of said that, well, actually, people have not always said this. The fathers were really clear in saying the Sunday is not a Sabbath. Like, we're not obeying it. It's not a Sabbath law. Sabbath is Jewish. That's Judaizing. You don't obey the Sabbath. That's something that's for Jews. But in the Reformation, it became an issue of, it's a new Sabbath, which is totally not what the church believed before. And I would argue the church before had it right. And again, the reformers did not get it right. Now, we can argue, I think there were pragmatic concerns of why they wanted to do that. But And also because they argue that the Ten Commandments were the table of the law that still is applicable to Christians. And unfortunately, you've got, well, the Sabbath law in there. Well, now I have to, if I say that, now I have to apply all of it. Now you have to obey all of it. And of course, the Sabbath law does apply to Christians, but not in a way that's direct, whereas all the moral laws directly apply. If I accuse you of something, and if I say, hey, Emmanuel, stop trashing Drake's car. And Emmanuel's like, well, I had good reason. What does that imply? Well, what does it imply, though? That he was trashing his car. Now, if he wasn't doing it, what would the response be? You've misunderstood. I'm not trashing his car. That would be the response. Jesus is responding by saying, he doesn't say, no, you've misunderstood, that they're not disobeying that. They're disobeying your traditions, Pharisees. They're not disobeying the law. He doesn't. Instead, he gives them a better example of people breaking the actual law in the Old Testament, and they're breaking it in accordance with what God commanded them to do. In other words, God actually commanded them to make bread and prepare all these things on the Sabbath day. So God actually commanded them to break the Sabbath every Sabbath. So now it's God commanding them to do it. Is it sin? It can't be. That means it's not inherently immoral. Now, here's another example of why it's not inherently immoral. God doesn't observe the Sabbath day because time doesn't exist in eternity. And the moral law is connected to the nature of God, the eternal nature of God. God is eternally faithful. Therefore, adultery is something that God would not have done in eternity, and in the way that he would do it with the Trinity. Lying is not something that is of God in eternity. Having some other God, that's, again, what is moral has to be connected to God in eternity. That's the eternal law. That's what remains. It remains whether you're talking about be fruitful and multiply, whether you're talking about his covenant with Abraham, whether you're talking about the Mosaic covenant, whether you're talking about the Davidic, whether you're talking about the new covenant with Jeremiah, or when Christ brings it in. It's all the same. We don't mess with the moral law because it's connected to the nature of God. But something you can set aside is not eternal. It's not an inherent moral. Now, we could talk a lot about this passage, but I need to move on to the next one. And so, therefore, Colossians 2:8 through 17. Who wants to read it? Yeah. Yeah, 8 to 17.
You through an empty, deceitful philosophy that is according to human traditions and the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ. For in him all the fullness of deity lives in bodily form, and you have been filled in him, who is the head over every ruler and authority. In him you also were circumcised, not, however, with a circumcision performed by human hands, but by the removal of the fleshly body, that is, through the circumcision done by Christ. Having been buried with him in baptism, you also have been raised with him through your faith in the power of God, who raised him from the dead. And even though you were dead in your transgressions and in the uncircumcision of your flesh, he nevertheless made you alive with him. Having forgiven all your transgressions, he has destroyed what was against us, a certificate of indebtedness expressed in decrees opposed to us. He has taken it away by nailing it to the cross. Disarming the rulers and authorities, he has made a public disgrace of them, triumphing over them by the cross. To 17, right?
Yep.
Therefore, do not let anyone judge you with respect to food or drink, or in the matter of a feast, new moon, or Sabbath days. These are only the shadow of the things to come, but the reality is Christ.
Okay. The therefore is on the heels of what? What did God do? Yeah, and by nailing to the cross, what did he do? He nailed it to the cross. It was hostile to us. What happened when he nailed to the cross? I don't know what your translations say. He canceled it. What was hostile to you? Because you had transgressions. It says he's having graciously forgiven us of all our transgressions, and you'll notice like all these are connected. Like having canceled out, meaning this because of this is connected to this. So he's forgiven us. Well, why? Because he's canceled out the certificate of debt consisting of decrees against us, which was hostile to us, has also taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the cross. What's he talking about? What's he taking out of the way? What's he canceled? What is he nailed to the cross? What's hostile to us in our sins? Yeah, what the certificate of debt, right? It's the law, the Mosaic law. Therefore, of course you wouldn't have someone judge you on the matter of Sabbath, because the Sabbath is a part of the Mosaic law. Now, he doesn't cancel out the moral law, but he tells us that we can't achieve that apart from Christ, so we have to be united through faith. And then he gives us his Spirit, and then the fruit of the Spirit is love and joy and kindness and patience that creates the moral law in our lives, because that's the character of God. But it doesn't create a particular day you might observe, and like you get it. Like that's why he says, and by the way, this is there are all sorts of people who try to like come up with other explanations of this. Some people will be like, well, it's their pagan days. Don't let anybody concerning pagan days. He just said the therefore was based on him canceling out the Mosaic law code. What does that have to do with pagan days? Pagan days are also never called Sabbaths. That makes no sense. Then you'll have other people say, well, it's just talking about the festivals, but the actual Sabbath day holds. This construction that Paul makes here, it says a festival, a new moon, or a Sabbath. So that is a construction you see in the Old Testament, talking about the yearly Sabbath, the monthly Sabbath, and the weekly Sabbath. So when he says Sabbath, that final one, it's the weekly Sabbath. No one is to judge you according to that. Why? Because God just canceled out that whole law. It's not something for you to observe. Why? Because it's a shadow. It's a theology that was communicating something about what Jesus was going to do, which is to, again, complete creation, throw out the rulers of this world, which he partially does here, by the way. He renders them powerless. Why? You guys remember? We talked about this a little bit. We talked about it a while ago. I won't, spank you if you're going to not remember it or something. Why? How does that relate? Him canceling out the Mosaic law code, which would actually damn us, and rendering basically the powers powerless. How are they connected? What's their power come from? If they're the rulers of this world, and the law of God has gone out into the world, don't they have the right to kill you? Because you broke the law. Don't they have the right to torture you? You broke the law. They have the right to imprison you and to possess you and to do whatever they want because you broke the law. Now they have no right. The law's been canceled. Jesus already paid for the sins. Jesus already died for it. They have no right over you now. They're rendered powerless, which again is a part of the already not yet. One day they'll be completely rendered powerless. They won't have any right in the world. Because of that, therefore, let no one judge you when it comes to you observing a Sabbath day or a particular holiday. Why? Because those are just shadows. They're just theology that the Old Testament was teaching about Christ. The substance, literally in the Greek, the body, not the shadow that's cast by the body, is Christ. Letting you know that Sabbath was about Christ, Not about you just taking a day off. Now, you can take a day off, like I was saying to Ritesh. You can take a day off because it's probably a good idea to rest. Your body needs rejuvenation, but that's not the purpose of the law. He doesn't say, hey, 6 days you'll work, and the 7th you'll take off because you really need a break. No, he's like, no, because you were slaves in Egypt, so I want you to reenact the slavery through your work, and then on the 7th day, I want you to rest to reenact my deliverance from slavery to you. That was the purpose of it. Tony? The Mosaic Law Code, yeah. Right. Right. Well, it's the whole thing in terms of, because the whole, so here's where people are right when they say, well, the law is not broken up in the Old Testament. It's not broken up in the Old Testament. It's all interwoven, which is why you have to cancel out the whole covenant. The whole covenant is interwoven. So either you obey this whole covenant or you don't. That's why if you disobey one part, this is why James says this and other, if you disobey one part, you've broken the covenant. Therefore, you disobey all of it. So you can't dissect it. What I'm saying is that Jesus comes along, and frankly, this is true in the prophets as well in the Old Testament, and lets us know that even though this is one covenant, within it is an eternal nature of God that is expressed in the morality of it. Whereas the ceremony seems to be not that. So that if it is set aside, it's not the end of the world. The real issue it's trying to point to is the morality and the theology and all of that sort of thing. But it still exists. Until it's canceled out, we're condemned by it. So Jesus has to cancel that entire thing out. Now, what is reinstituted with Christians is love, the love of God over everything. So with all you've got, everything you've got, the love of neighbor, and that's the law of Christ, which Paul says ends up fulfilling the entire law. And Jesus says it fulfills the entire law and prophets, so the entire Old Testament. And he doesn't mean by that it ends up fulfilling, what you do with your wife during her menstrual period. That's not what he's talking about. He means the morality of the Old Testament, you actually becoming the character of God, you actually becoming holy because he is holy, which was the whole point of the law. You actually being that is fulfilled in loving God with everything you've got and loving your neighbor as yourself. Or as Christ's new commandment to you, love one another as I have loved you, right? So more than even yourself. The whole law, everything is fulfilled in that, the whole moral law. And right after he says that in Romans, Paul says that in Romans, he goes on to talk about eating meat and drinking wine and observing certain days. And he's like, actually, you're fine. Go ahead and do what you want in that. Don't judge one another over it because you're not under the law. As he talks about himself, I'm not under law, I'm under grace. And then he makes it clear, I'm under the law of God. That is the eternal moral law of God. But I'm not under the Mosaic law. Because the Mosaic law includes all that other stuff. Like, where's your temple? Where's your sacrifices if you're under the Mosaic law? Oh, like Drake and I, we had someone come into our church that, was saying, you're in sin if you don't observe the Sabbath. And the literal Sabbath for him, Saturday. And we were trying to communicate to him is that you don't obey the Sabbath. You can't obey it. There's no temple. You can't there's sacrifices that are supposed to be made on the Sabbath. There are things you have to do on the Sabbath that you don't do. And you have to understand, if you break even a part of the law, you're no longer in accordance with that covenant. You've broken the whole thing. So all these Sabbatarians, all these guys are like, oh, no, you got to obey the Sabbath. And it's like, no, you don't. I'm not under the Mosaic law code, and neither are you. And you need to stop binding Christians and their conscience to the Mosaic law code. Bind their conscience to the law of Christ. Because that's the character of Christ. Well, I would say Sabbatarians are Seventh-day Adventists. I think that there are Reformed groups who are Sabbatarians, but they move it to Sunday. Yeah, Christian Sabbath. So they just like, oh, the new Sabbath is Sunday. And it's like, no, the New Testament Sabbath is eternity. It's the day which Christ throws out all the rulers from the world. Creation's done. you're glorified in your resurrected bodies, and the new world begins, and that's when you have the 8th day. That is Sunday that is forever. And Drake and I, look, you guys were here. Drake and I, to this day, by the way, are mocked for saying that Sunday is supposed to be the whole week. But I don't know how you have that picture of eternity without making Sunday the whole week. Like you're communicating that if Sunday is just the day, the holy day, and not the whole week is the holy week that communicates all of the new creation, you're communicating that the day of the new creation ends, that there's some day after it. And I'm sorry, that's not the way the church has ever treated it. That's not the way I think the Bible treats it. I think early Christians knew we meet on Sunday and it represents this is the new day. It's not the Sabbath day. Where were they on the Sabbath day in Acts? People act like they're worshiping in the synagogue. They're not worshiping in the synagogue. Why are they with a bunch of Christians then on the Sabbath? They're not. They're preaching the gospel to Jews on the Sabbath. They're working on the Sabbath because they realize they're not under the Sabbath anymore. It's the same thing when they go to the pagans. They go to the pagan temples, not because they're worshiping with the pagans. They're going there because they're communicating the gospel to them while they're all worshiping their gods. When you see the Christians meeting, they're actually meeting and worshiping on, frankly, what would be to us Saturday night, but is Sunday to them. And they often go from evening to early morning, and you have the whole instance with the kid falling out and dying, and Paul raises him from the dead or whatever. People think that happened on Sunday night, by the way, but actually they don't have communion until after that happens, which is after midnight. So if you were to actually accord that to where our timeline and everything, that means they had communion on Monday. So their church was on Monday then. So either they had church on our Saturday night, or they had it on Monday. That's not the sacred Sunday day. It's like, again, it doesn't matter, people. Like the point is the theology it communicates, that you understand. This is all about us looking toward the world to come. And it's supposed to set you as a Christian and your mind on the world to come. In Hebrews, what world is Jesus given? Hebrews 2. What world is subject to Christ? This one? The world to come, he says. That's our world. That's Jesus's world. That's our world. This is the devil's world. This is the world where you get shot in the throat for preaching Christ. This is not our world. We need to set our minds on eternity. You may be like, oh, sure, I want to, but I want to live out my life first. It's like, okay, well, Charlie didn't get to live out his life. James doesn't get, James, out of all the disciples, like I would not have wanted to have been James. He literally is the first guy who dies out of the disciples. He doesn't even get out of Jerusalem. He's just like immediately killed by Herod. And it's like, well, I didn't even get to see anything. But see, I have a feeling he didn't need to, or necessarily think that he wanted to, because his eyes were on the world to come. Look at Paul's attitude. For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. You can only say that if your mind is set on eternity, if your mind is set on the world to come. That's what our Sunday worship and weekly worship is supposed to orient us to. That's what the theology of Sabbath was supposed to orient the Jews to. They were supposed to look at the day when they would be delivered. But now Christ has delivered them, and so we celebrate a new day and a week that's unlike the one before, in order to communicate that this is no longer, you no longer need freedom from your enemies. You've been delivered. That's been done. Stop celebrating it as though it hasn't been done. Instead, celebrate the new day. That's the eternal day. That's the day we're truly a part of. And that will reorient your life, I think, toward what it needs to be. Drake, want to anything? Oh, yeah. Sorry. I actually had that written down, I think. Well, I was going to, 4, 1 through 10, I was going to do.
I would argue that is the argument of the theological impact of Sabbath.
Yeah.
If there was a question of moral or theological, Hebrews question the theological.
Anybody want to read Hebrews 4, 1 through 10? And I won't really comment more on it because I've already commented on it, but just to kind of solidify what I've said. Okay.
Hebrews 4, 1 through 10. Therefore, since the promise of entering his rest still stands, let us be careful that none of you be found to have fallen short of it. For we also have had the gospel preached to us just as they did, but the message they heard was of no value to them, because those who heard it did not combine it with faith. Now we who have believed enter that rest, just as God has said. So I declare on oath in my anger they shall never enter my rest. And yet his work has been finished since the creation of the world. For somewhere he has spoken about the seventh day in these words, and on the seventh day God rested from all his work. And again in the passage above he says, they shall never enter my rest. It still remains that some will enter that rest, and those who formerly had the gospel preached to them did not go in, because of their disobedience. Therefore, God again set a certain day, calling it today. When a long time later he spoke through David, as was said before, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. For if Joshua had given them rest, God would not have spoken later about it today. There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from his own work, just as God did from his.
Okay. Is that clear, or do I need to comment on it? Right? So wait, have we entered into it? What does it say? Yes. So we've entered into, how have we entered? Well, through Christ, because he's brought it in. So we're not the Sabbath. So in other words, this is what I'm trying to convey, just to put it in a big nutshell. The Sabbath is looking forward to God doing something that will complete creation. Christ's work and the Sunday and the whole weekly observance is looking now, if we were to look at Sabbath, is a backward look, because now we're past that. We've entered into the end of creation through what Christ has done. And so there's an already not yet sense in which obviously our physical still needs to enter in, and perfection and all of that glorification. But we've already entered into it. And therefore to proclaim, this is why the early church said to proclaim Sabbath again is Judaizing. It's acting like Christ did not complete it. And we're not yet there. And God still needs to do something to complete creation. And that's not true. So it's not just like, oh, it'd be okay if you celebrate Sabbath if you want to. It's like, no, it's not. I mean, obviously, I don't think you're damned, but it's not okay in the sense that you're proclaiming a false theology, and I don't think you understand biblical theology then. So it is a problem, because I think it's an error. It's not a damnable error, obviously, but we shouldn't be doing this. Yes. Yes. So if you think about it, so the work of creation was what? So God makes the world physical or whatever. He orders out of chaos or whatever. Be fruitful, multiply, and fill up the earth to where man has dominion over the earth. That was not completed because Adam and Eve fall off. And so because of the fall, that work is not done. Christ comes. So now basically you can fill up the earth all you want. Everyone's going to go to hell. So the earth will never be filled up with man actually ruling over it, chaos subdued, because they'll just continue on. Christ comes in so that all these people who were filled up and believe in him can actually fill up the world and subdue it and rule over that world. This is why you get all this ruling language in the New Testament. They'll inherit the earth. You'll sit on my throne as I sat on my father's throne. There's a lot of this ruling. They'll be rulers of the world, all that sort of thing, because that's the idea. He completed what Adam did not. And so it's done. That's why he says it is finished. He's not just saying, oh yeah, all atonement for your sins is done. That's not just what he's saying. He's saying it's all done. I have finished it. It literally mimics the creation week of God finishing his work. He literally has finished it. That's it. And so if not for Christ, creation's undone and we have no hope. Because of Christ, the work that God began has been completed. So now all it is applying it. All it is applying it to everyone. Applying it to those who have not become Christians yet. Applying it to our physical bodies and the physical world. But that's application. It's not something that needs to be accomplished. Everything's already accomplished. Right. We're in the right. Loading. The dots are going. And that's our hope. That's what we're looking forward to. We're eagerly awaiting it now. Yeah, right. That's his point. Yeah, his point is, look, he's like, look, if the Sabbath were some literal thing, then they would have entered into it. His whole point is that, in fact, it would have been done at creation because God talks about a Sabbath. His point is that they didn't enter into it. Joshua didn't provide him rest. That's not the Sabbath. The Sabbath is literally this new world that Jesus has brought in, and therefore those who are in Jesus have entered it. And there still remains a day for the people of God to enter it in that sense, because there's still that new world to come. But we've also entered into another sense. Yes. That's why Paul in 1 Corinthians 15 is like, hey, look, Corinthians, you need to get it. If you deny the bodily resurrection, you are denying our hope. We have no hope then. Yeah. Creation is still undone. Yeah. Yep. Right. Yep. It's dragging us all into the world that he inherited.
It's important to remember, why did the other Hebrews mention that at all? Because that church is tempted to anchor themselves back
into a literal Sabbath. Yeah.
So
Judaizing.
So I always say, if you're ever tempted to like, well, I think I should do this just to, remember my ancestors or something like that. Like, look, it might start there, but there's always a temptation to say, yeah, this is an anchor because God said it once and it was good once, and I'm gonna go back to it. And right, he was saying, be careful because they had that Sabbath and they didn't enter the rest anyway. And so, don't think that's your anchor. Your anchor has to be.
Well, and just as a reminder, we started out with Deuteronomy. We read the passage. You guys remember the passage? Was this covenant, these laws made with anyone before them? No, he explicitly says, I didn't make this covenant with your fathers. Just you. Now I'm making it with you. Which means it's not an eternal law because all the moral laws are made with people before, when we see God making covenant with people or whatever. So it's talking about the Mosaic Law Code.
And the true Sabbath should be a unifying thing. I see so many times, like the Sabbatarians, it becomes divisive. Somebody went to football.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, now we're making the Sabbath.
Yeah, nobody. Well, that's the fear is like, so here's this theology that I think is good biblical theology that all of us under a Christian king might actually go to death for. I mean, or be put in prison or whatever, because that guy doesn't know the Bible as well, but he's a Christian king. Yeah. Yeah. Watch out for Christian nationalism, man. You don't want it. Right. Well, that's the funny, right. The funny thing is everybody's doing a whole weekend, right? It's like, well, everyone ignores that part of the command. They don't even see that it's a part of the command. The command literally is, yeah, you are too. It literally starts as the, it's the imperatival use of the imperfect or whatever. which is what all the commands are. And so that's the command is not just, hey, take a break on the seventh day. That's not what the command is. All right, yeah, Tony, go ahead. Yeah. 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 So yeah, I wouldn't judge them in it. I would say it depends on why they're doing it. Most Messianic Jews I know realize this. Now, not all of them, but a lot of them realize this. At least, I mean, I went to Moody with a lot of Messianic. Maybe they're more informed, but they realize this, and they're just like, we're just doing this because we're treating this day as part of the larger week that's of Christ. We're doing it because, you know, in a Jewish heritage, we're meeting on Saturday, but Saturday is really our Sunday as well. Is kind of the idea, and it's like, yeah, that's fine because we don't have a new Christian Sabbath or anything. You're not bound to a particular day or whatever, and you're meeting with other Christians, you're fellowshipping and all of that, and you understand the theology. Then great. Which is why Paul says, "Don't let anybody judge you concerning it," meaning it's free. You can use it however you want. It's an amoral thing. So you can take any day of the week now, and as long as you're serving Christ on that week in thankfulness and you're worshiping him, then who cares what you, it's every Christian. This is why he goes into this whole thing in Romans. It's like, why are you judging the servant of another person? Like, obviously we are to judge people in terms of morality, but in terms of ceremony, it's like, why are you judging their ceremony? That's stupid. Don't be doing that. Your brother, Christ died for him. Christ died for you. He belongs to the Lord. You belong to the Lord. You both belong to the Lord. And so no matter what we do, whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord. Let's not worry about what you're drinking, what you're eating, what days you're observing. Those are all things that frankly will pass away because they're not moral. They're not part of the character of God. Yeah. But for us, we have to recognize every day as sacred unto the Lord. Yeah, and therefore, if you happen to pick, I'm going to communicate this I'm going to pick a Monday, and I pick a Tuesday, somebody else picks a Wednesday or whatever. Yeah, great, because all of them are sacred now, because they're all the new creation that is coming in. Right, because you are the new creation in this world. Your spirit. Well, you have to worship God every day. That's a moral issue. Right. Right. Whether you eat or drink. Yeah. Yeah. We need to start realizing that we are people of not of this world, but the world to come, and live accordingly. And those people who we are in that world to come will always be mindful of God and be joyful in his presence. And so we need to live in that joy every day. Well, and if someone kills you then, or kills your family, or takes away all your stuff and ruins your world here, you're kind of like, I'm not of this world. And this is going to be hard, but this isn't my place anyway. And I wasn't hoping to establish myself here anyway. I'm already established in the new world. Christ already has both feet in it, and I'm in him. So I have both my feet in it as well. Anything else? I'm looking at Tony. I'm like, anything else? Yeah. Yeah. Well, even with the law to the Israelites is supposed to mimic. There's supposed to be a shadow of that, which is what the whole salvation. That's why he has. You have to wonder, like, why does he have them go down to Egypt? What's the whole point of that? And it is because he wants them to be enslaved, because he wants to mimic what it is for us as humans in this world under the rule of the devil. And then in saving them, he wants us to know this is what my deliverance will be. Here's a shadow of my deliverance as well. Ultimately, when I finish the creative work that I began. Like even I try to point this out to everyone in the creation account, God makes the statement, or the text makes the statement that God had finished all his work that he created to make. And you're like, he created to make? Why didn't it just say he created them? But that's the idea. Creation's not done at the moment that that's the beginning of creation. Creation's not done until Christ returns. All chaos is thrown out and Jesus rules. Then creation's done. So my point is that yes, it's accomplished at the cross. My point is it's not applied to where, it's not applied to everything until that moment. And therefore we live in this state to where it's the already not yet. We live in as John says, we live in the last hour. Last hour doesn't mean, oh, it's almost the end. Last hour means it's the time when daylight mixtures with night. We live in the time when Antichrist is still around, when evil's still here, and yet Christ has brought in the new world. And so we live in the mixed world. But yeah, twilight. There you go. Yeah, that's where that last hour terminology. Everyone's like, "Oh, last hour, we're the end of the world." It's like, no, that's not what he's saying. Look at the context. Yeah. Yes, we are in the wilderness. we are freed from Egypt. Yeah. There you go. But in reality, we're kind of like, imagine if Moses had stepped foot over into the promised land and had secured it and rid all the Canaanites of it. In reality, then the land is kind of ours too already. It's that kind of thing. All right, I'll stop with the analogies. Drake, you want to pray for us?
Lord, keep us grounded in Sabbath, grounded in Christ as the first fruits of all that you promised us, and knowing that because He's accomplished it, there's no one that can thwart that. It doesn't matter who they killed, it doesn't matter who they try to persecute. Those things will come to pass because the Word is with them. Let us have our minds and our eyes there, control our thoughts as we grow into Christ and grow the church together, sojourning our quiet ways of life. We pray these things in His name.
Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, guys. Yes, that's it.